What is going on, everybody? The MLB trade deadline is one of the most exciting parts of the MLB season. And with it right around the corner, I wanted to take some time and see what players are most likely to be dealt for every team this year. Make sure to let me know down in the comments what moves you want your team to make and what you think of the picks I made down in the comments. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. Getting us started in Arizona, the player I think they're most likely to try and deal is Jake McCarthy. He's having a bit of a down year this year, but he was pretty productive in his first two seasons of the Bigs. Between his age, physical tools, and having lots of teams control left, it adds to his value. And plus, Corbin Carroll is more than capable of moving over to center if the team does decide to trade McCarthy. I feel like they're going to try to send him to a team like the Cubs, White Sox, Tigers, or the Guardians to try and strengthen their starting pitching. Heading down to Atlanta, I think the Braves are going to try and trade Eddie Rosario. He is having a down year on an expiring contract, and they need better options versus right-handed pitching for a left field platoon. He has under 100 OPS plus versus lefties, and Ozuna and Pilar have both been better options, making Rosario expendable, and they could also use him as a piece to potentially strengthen the bullpen. In my opinion, some of the teams that they might reach out to are the White Sox, Cubs, or the Yankees. For the Baltimore Orioles, I think they're going to try and trade Anthony Santander. He's having a very good season, putting up a 263, 336, 461 slash line with 9 homers and a 120 WRC plus. With only 2 years of team control left and plenty of outfield depth in the bigs and the minors, Santander is looking expendable. They could try to send him to the Cubs, Detroit, or even Cleveland to try to get some much-needed starting pitching help. Keeping it in the AL East, the Boston Red Sox are probably going to be one of the teams looking to retool and sort of fall out of the playoff picture after the deadline, as they play in the most difficult division in baseball and are slowly falling further and further back into the standings. The person I can see them most likely trying to trade is Adam Duvall. He's on a 1-year deal and has missed a little time due to injury, but he's put really good numbers up in a small sample size. He's a big power bat that can play DH and play the outfield, which is going to be a hot commodity at the deadline. Some teams I could see trading for him are the Rangers, the Guardians, or the Reds. For the Chicago Cubs, I think they're going to try and trade CODY Bellinger. They're an interesting team because they're not super far out of first place in their division, despite being 4 games under 500 at the time of me making this video. But I personally think they're going to be one of the teams retooling at the deadline, meaning they're going to try and trade contracts like Bellinger's, who expire at the end of the season. The reason I think he's most likely to be traded is that they have a ton of guys who can play the outfield, but Bellinger could get them the best haul because he can DH and play a ton of positions, which teams like the Yankees, Padres, or Rangers could use. Keeping it in Chicago with the White Sox, they're a team that's probably most likely going to be having a fire sale at the deadline, and I think the player that's most likely to get dealt is Lucas Giolito. He's on a contract year, having a bounce-back season, and with starting pitching being so high in demand at the deadline, he could help them to get prospects to help jumpstart the rebuild from teams like the Reds, Diamondbacks, or Orioles. Heading over to Cincinnati, we got the Reds. The Reds have a already stacked infield at the big league level, so I think they're going to try and trade some of their top prospects in either Noelvi Marte or Cam Collier to help strengthen their rotation in their lineup. Some potential partners I could see them trading with are the Guardians, Detroit, or Miami. Keeping in the state of Ohio, we have the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians desperately need help in their lineup if they want to be able to win their weak division and have any chance of going anywhere in the playoffs. I think the player most likely to be dealt for them is Shane Bieber. He only has 2 years of team control left, and the Guards are notorious for not paying their superstars. And he could be used to get a guy like Paul Goldschmidt. Some teams I could see trying to get a hold of him are Arizona, St. Louis, and the Angels. Heading over to the never-ending rebuild that is the Colorado Rockies, the player I think that is most likely to be traded by them is Ryan McMahon. And that's because he is the only real chance the Rockies have of getting a good haul of prospects at the deadline. Lots of teams need middle infield / DH help, and he has lots of team control, meaning he'll demand an even greater haul. Some teams I could see trying to make a move for him are San Diego, Seattle, and Milwaukee. Heading over to the Motor City, we have the Detroit Tigers, who are in severe need of MLB level hitting and young talent. The player I think they're most likely going to try and trade is Eduardo Rodriguez. He's putting up Cy Young caliber numbers, but he has an opt-out at the end of the season. And I think teams like Arizona, Baltimore, or the Angels could reach out and try and trade for him. Heading over to Houston with the Astros, I don't really think there's a guy on the big league roster that's going to be traded. There's not a lot they need to do to improve their team aside from replacing Martin Maldonado, and I think they're going to use their farm system to do so. Some teams I think they could try and reach out to are the Kansas City Royals, the White Sox, or the Rays. Speaking of the Royals, I think they're most likely going to try and trade Aroldis Chapman. Chapman's having an amazing bounce-back season with a 2.7 ERA and a 41.8 K percentage, but with his contract expiring at the end of the season, it just makes sense that they're going to try and trade him. Some teams I could see making a deal for him are the Dodgers, the Rangers, and the Rays. Heading over to LA with the Angels, I think the player most likely to be traded is Joe Adell. He's been amazing in AAA, but with Mickey Moniak breaking out, it's not likely that he gets another look in the bigs for the Angels. The Angels could send him to a team like Detroit, Cleveland, or the Cubs, who have the starting pitching they need, so that they can become true contenders and potentially keep Ohtani at the end of the season. Keeping it in LA with the Dodgers, I think they're either going to try and trade Andy Pages or Dalton Rushing, one of their top prospects, to get a shortstop since Miguel Vargas has been absolutely horrible for them this season. I could see them trading with St. Louis, Detroit, or the White Sox. Heading down to Miami, you have the Marlins, and the player I think they're most likely going to try and trade is Jorge Soler. The Marlins are in a position not many people saw them being at the beginning of the season, which is fighting for a playoff spot, and with the demand of outfield/DH bats at the deadline and Soler having an opt-out at the end of the season, I think he's going to be dealt so that the Marlins can get some much-needed bullpen/corner infield help because they have been lacking production from both spots. They also have Xavier Edwards in the minors that they could potentially call up to replace him if they do trade him. Some teams I could see making a move for him are Seattle, the Padres, or the Yankees. Heading back up north to Milwaukee, I think the Brewers are going to try and trade Corbin Burnes. He's already voices his pleasure with how the Brewers are handling his contract situation, and from what I've heard, there hasn't really been any reports that progress has been made. They could get an absolute haul for him that would help them to retool their roster and make a strong push for the playoffs in the second half. And I think that teams like Baltimore, Arizona, or the Angels could reach out to try and trade with them. For the Minnesota Twins, it was kind of hard to choose, but I think they're going to try and trade Joey Gallo. He's only on a one-year deal and putting up great numbers, but the Twins lead the league in K percentage by a pretty wide margin and could use Gallo to bring in a guy that strikes out at a lower rate and has better contact numbers. Some teams I could see them reaching out to are the Giants, Colorado, or Oakland. Heading up to the Big Apple with the Yankees, I think they're going to try and trade Oswald Peraza. Their refusal to give him playing time at the big league level while giving Volpe, Oswald Cabrera, and DJ LeMahieu playing time every day just makes me think that they're going to use Peraza as trade bait. Some teams I could see the Yankees making a deal with are the Cardinals, the White Sox, and the Athletics. Keep it in New York with the Mets. I think they try to move Daniel Vogelbach with a prospect or two to get some much-needed bullpen help. He has an extremely small contract and gets on base at an extremely high clip, and moving him could allow Mark Vientos to get some more consistent playing time. I could see them making a trade with teams like Oakland, Kansas City, or the Padres. Heading over to the absolute mess that is the Oakland Athletics, I think they're going to try and trade Brent Rooker. He's having an absolute monster season, and at 28, he doesn't really fit into the rebuild window. He has team control until 2028, so add that to the season he's having, and the A's could get an absolute haul from teams like the Yankees, the Mets, or even the Guardians for him. Heading back to the NL East, I think the Phillies are going to try and trade one of their top prospects in Mick Abel. They don't really have anyone on their big league roster they can afford to get rid of at the moment, and with Dave Dombrowski being notorious for emptying his team's farm systems, I would not be surprised to see him try to move Abel for some pitching or a first baseman at the deadline. I think some teams that would be willing to listen to offers are Detroit, the White Sox, St. Louis, or Seattle. Keeping in the state of Pennsylvania with the Pirates, the player I think they're most likely to try and trade is Connor Joe. He's older with team control until 2028 and can be used to get a star player or a haul of prospects. The team needs middle infield help and bullpen arms, and I think teams like Seattle, the Padres, or the Guardians can answer their calls. Heading over to San Diego, the Padres have been one of the most disappointing teams in baseball this year, and I think they could try to move Jake Cronenworth to try and get some better bats into their lineup. He's having a down year, but is still playing good defense, getting on base, and driving in runs at a good rate, but the team needs someone that hits more for average and power to strengthen their lineup that is holding their team back. Some teams I could see making a move for him are Colorado, Seattle, or the Mets. For the San Francisco Giants, the player I think they're most likely to try and trade is Jock Peterson. They passed on getting a haul for him last year and ended up making the playoffs, and he's putting up even better numbers this year, so I don't think they're going to make the same mistake twice. I think they could try and flip him to a team like Philadelphia, Cleveland, or the Mets for some prospects and or bullpen arms. I think the Seattle Mariners are going to try and trade one of their top minor league prospects in EMERSON Hancock for a better second base/DH option because they haven't been able to get much production out of either spot. Some teams I could see them making a deal with are the White Sox, the Padres, Colorado, or St. Louis. For the St. Louis Cardinals, I think they're going to try and trade Paul Goldschmidt. He's old and is a free agent after next season, and I think he could be used to get the pitching/farm help needed to better set their team up for the future. I think they try and trade him to a team like the Guardians, the Mets, or the Yankees for either starting pitching or a haul of prospects. Heading down to Florida with the Rays, I think they're going to try and move one of their top prospects in either Carson Williams or Oslevis Basabe for some bullpen help. Some teams I could see them reaching out to are Detroit, Kansas City, or St. Louis. For the Texas Rangers, I think they're going to try and trade Robbie Grossman for a bullpen arm. He's only good as a platoon bat versus lefties, and they have guys that can replace him, and his deal is over at the end of the year. Some teams I could see them trying to make a deal with are the Yankees, St. Louis, and Kansas City. Heading up north to the 6th, I think the Blue Jays tried to flip CAVAN BIGGIO with a prospect or two for some pitching. It's clear he isn't a fit in Toronto anymore, but with his defensive versatility and having team control until 2026, I think a team can try and take a flyer out on him. Some teams they could try and trade with are the White Sox, Kansas City, or the Nationals. Speaking of the Nationals, I think they're going to try and trade Victor Robles. He's having his first productive season since 2019, so I think they try to sell high on him to add some pieces to their farm system. Some teams I could see them trading with are Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Seattle. That's going to be all for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.